engaged in bringing about healthy solutions for many years. I began working with Judge Gottlieb in 2010. And the reason I got to know him is because he invited the adoption of restorative justice into the juvenile justice campus. And what that means is that we had an opportunity to work with youth when they broke the law. And what we would do is we would invite them to recognize the harm that they caused, apologize for that, make things right, and commit to maybe a new lifestyle or new future intentions or a new commitment to good citizenship. And once the juvenile was all geared up for that, we would actually go meet with the victim and ask them about their experience of the crime, ask them about if they wanted to receive an apology, if they wanted to receive restitution, if they wanted to meet the person who did it, and that person wants to make things right. So Judge Gottlieb was the innovator who brought that into the juvenile justice campus. And over the course of 10 years, over 1,000 of these cases were brought through, and the success ratio and stories around it are just amazing. So that's where I met Judge Gottlieb. And the reason for Share is a little bit different, but it's connected to restorative justice in that it's the ideal for it is to engage youth in conversations that focus on respect and focus on problem solving, so that those youth don't find themselves in a situation where they may end up having unnecessary contact, negative contact with institutions, whether that be schools or the justice system. So we wanted to stretch out the influence of the type of work we were doing beyond the center. And so Judge Gottlieb launched this Stop Hate and Respect Everyone program. And what it is it's taking a cohort of youth through these certain skill building activities and learning. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Judge Gottlieb because this was his creation. But that's a little bit of context, a little bit of history around the work. So if you unmute yourself, we are...
Got it. Okay. So can everybody hear me okay? Yes? Okay, very good. So Tim's absolutely right. We started off with restorative justice in the juvenile justice campus in about 2009, 2010. And as it took off and flourished, we decided to kind of extend it a little bit. And instead of just making it a one-on-one restorative justice situation, I was down in San Diego at a conference and saw this program called Share that was implemented by, of all people, the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. And they were doing it using a whole lot of volunteers with their department and going to various high schools and junior high schools and teaching this curriculum that really had a lot of flavors of restorative justice. So I formed a group, and that group came up with, you know, the beginnings of the curriculum, and Tim was involved in that. And essentially what we did is we took restorative practices, coupled it with a video, an impactful video, which kind of showed a lot of bullying and racism and you know, other kind of hate type crimes, and put the program aside along the side of restorative justice principles, and put together about a 6-week curriculum to go with it. So we first started utilizing the program at the juvenile justice campus. They're still utilizing it there. And we haven't had a lot of data-driven research on the program as of yet, because just haven't had enough of that kind of interest behind it to do that. But I think now, with what's going on in the world today, I think that we wanted to, when Tim and I discussed this, I said, you know, the goal behind Share was to really make it a program that could be utilized with, you know, CBOs, with community organizations, in schools, and, you know, throughout California. So I'm going to leave it at that for right now. And Tim, maybe you can kind of go through a little bit of the curriculum, and then I can kind of talk about some of the goals and objectives of the program.
Tim, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I just said the most amazing 3 sentences of my life. I was on mute. Just kidding. All right. So what we have here is this curriculum. And I designed this. I can send it to people if you want it, if this interests you. I designed it that you could take these 5 sessions, you could read through this curriculum, and you should be able to take a group of youth through this. And so I have a little before you begin content, but what I want to dive into is the progression of the curriculum. So as you all know, Kimberly started this book study, not with Reconcile, the book we just finished, but with a book about cultural proficiency and viewing culture as an asset. And that is what I think of culture as. I think of it as an asset. I think I've mentioned on this call before that I grew up in multiple countries, Brazil, Portugal, Canada. I lived in England. And so I always approach cultures from this position of what can I learn from the people here, what works, what don't I know that I should know, and engaging in these deeper conversations. And I always grow from it. So the first session is a recognition of culture as an asset. So we talk about the ways that each youth who joins in this cohort, they would talk about how their family has prepared them for a great life. And they would connect that back to their culture, their cultural stories, lessons, traditions, ways of doing things. And the reason that's the first session is because ideally this cohort of youth don't know each other yet. And what we're inviting them to do is get to know each other and talk about their life in a way that brings out these values. Transitioning from that, the next session, the goal is really around these listening skills. And so teaching the relationship between trust, communication, information, and outcomes. If any of you have ever noticed that the people you trust are the same people that you communicate with freely and quickly, and when you're communicating freely and quickly, access to information is prompt and available, and then the outcomes of that communication and that work are very high and very positive. So we go over that with the group, and then we actually teach them some skills, these active listening skills about what not to do in a conversation, what blocks a conversation, and then what actually creates space to listen to people in a conversation. So the first session is about culture as an asset. The second session is about listening. The third session is around this tool that really came out of the Shared program from LA. And it's taking a negative scenario that you're in, maybe because of peer pressure, and learning the skill about flipping it. And so there's role plays in this. And the idea is, so let's say for an example, there's peer pressure to do something wrong. And the person says, if you were my friend, you would do this wrong thing. The flip it skill is to reverse that and say, if you were my friend, you wouldn't ask me to do this wrong thing. And to just flip the logic on that and set the standards for that friendship. So the progression moves from culture as an asset to how to listen to other people, and then into this flip it skill. Every session, because these are maybe spread out over weeks where the cohort would meet at a regular time, every session has, of course, these closing comments. What I learned today, one commitment I have, one thing that would be helpful to me. Moving into the fourth session is this idea around inviting accountability. So that's setting standards within a relationship. And that's very similar to flipping it, but the difference is that it positions the student to require respect. And so that's where that respect element of the stop hate and respect everyone gets taught. And then again, closing comments, what they learned. And the fifth one is inviting solutions. So once you have that standard of respecting each other, how you actually problem solve in the relationships that you have. So this is designed, like I said, that anybody who wants to take their youth or their students or whatever cohort they have in their school through this progression, I'm happy to make this available. And the document is designed that you could read it over one time and more or less have an idea about what you're taking the youth through. So again, it's learning is where we start. We move to listening, then the skill-based flip it, and then inviting accountability and inviting solutions. So that's how it's organized. And I believe that's the review of the content that you were asking for, Judge Gottlieb. So I'm gonna stop sharing there and then go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Tim. So I want to kind of go through a couple of other things with the group. I want to talk a little bit about what some of the goals and objectives are. And then I want to tell you about some experiences that I had with the SHARE program itself. So the group that put together kind of the Central Valley version of SHARE, our goals and visions were as follows. First of all, we wanted to change attitudes about hate and intolerance and promote respect amongst high school aged and junior high school aged youth. We did want to have a video because we know that with our youth and with everybody, oftentimes visualization is more powerful than words. And that took us a long time to get that video together, and I look at it now, and it's still, you know, it's a little bit outdated, but I think it's still really, really powerful. I know I look at it and still in certain parts, I get tears in my eyes about some of the things that are going on in the video. We wanted to have a curriculum that utilized some of the LA model, particularly the flip it concept. We wanted to incorporate restorative justice principles, particularly having the youth engage in a respect agreement, talking about the effects of bullying and intolerance and discrimination. We wanted to definitely have a program that brought together people that would be able to role play and participate. Because again, I think all of us that are in this chat room know that kids learn in different ways. Some will learn by reading, some will learn by seeing, but the most important tool of learning, I think, is doing. And so part of the whole role-playing concept is to give the kids experience at doing it. One of the things, I'm involved in karate, and one of the things that they drill into us is muscle memory. That you want to do something enough times so that when you're in that situation of being attacked by somebody, you know how to react because of the muscle memory and you don't freeze up. And so I think that that applies in everyday life as well, is that if you do something and change the way you do it to a more positive method, then when you're faced with that situation, the hope is that you will revert to what you've been doing. We also wanted to, have this be valley-wide. And so part of the goal is for those that are implementing it to be able to share it with others at a no-cost basis. We didn't want to have this like one of those programs from Delaware, New York, or anywhere where they charge you, fees to implement it and for the program, and then they fly somebody out to teach it and so on and so forth. We wanted it to be a local program put together by local people and for local kids. At the same time, we want to make sure that it's expansive throughout the valley and even beyond. So I want to share, a couple of examples, or one powerful example that we had happen in one of the sessions. And imagine a video where you have two young men in a car driving in a neighborhood, and the passenger says to the driver, hey, you know what? These neighbors just moved in, and the woman is always walking around with her head thing on. I don't know, they call it a hijab, or I'm not sure what they call it, but and I just think, you know what, she doesn't belong in my neighborhood, and you know what, she's probably a terrorist, and this is, bad for the neighborhood. Why don't we go on by, and I've got this milkshake, I'm just going to throw it at her and tell her to get the hell out of our town, or to go home, go back to where she's from. And so the video shows, them doing that and tossing the milkshake on this woman, and her reaction to it, her fear, and the two young men going off laughing. And so I said that I was going to play the role of the student throwing the milkshake. And, after we've established, some context, and we've established kind of a rapport amongst the students, and we actually did this at Fresno High. And so one of the young women decided, and she was Black, and she decided she wanted to come up and do this role play with me. And so I sat there and I said, hey, come on, let's go and do this. And it'll be cool. And, she said, no, I don't think that's cool. And I said, what do you mean it's not cool? She's a terrorist, and she shouldn't be in my neighborhood. And so she goes on and she says, no, but that's not cool to do. That's not nice. And I said, hey, are you my friend or not? If you're my friend, you're going to come on and do this with me because, that's what I want to do. And so she pretended that she was the driver of the car. She held on to the steering wheel and she put her foot down and she made the screeching sound. She said, "Arr!" And she said, get out of my car. And I looked at her and I said, what? What do you mean get out of your car? She said, get out of my car. I don't want any racist person associating with me. And I was, and everybody in the audience, applauded, and, it was a great moment. Now I'll say this, not all of the situations when you do this type of situation and this role modeling and role playing turn out so great. As I imagine a lot of you educators, and there have been models that you've done in terms of role play or otherwise that don't always go that great. But the point is that even when it doesn't go in the right direction, it opens up a conversation, and you can get people talking about, why is it that we, stereotype certain people in a certain way, and it brings out a lot of discussion. So I'm going to leave it at that and turn it back over to Tim for some follow-up on some of the things that are part of the whole program. I think you're still on mute.
Great. All right. So like I mentioned before, the idea is that we invite a changed behavior and that we give skills to change that behavior. And so, you know, when Judge Gottlieb was sharing about setting the ground rules and engaging in the role play, we teach beforehand what we want to see come out of the role play and the skills, and then we let their creativity, you know, solve for it. Because unfortunately, these scenarios aren't outside of people's experiences. And the question is, how do you prepare someone to respond in a way that's helpful and in a way that actually brings the best out of people? And I think one of the things about the program is that with these skills, people can make adjustments in their life that they wanted to make, but didn't have the skills to make before, without that teaching. Of course, you know, we always preface the role plays by saying, you know, this is something that we hope you don't experience or don't see or don't have to go through. And the video, which unfortunately I don't have the technology to share, that is watched before people engage in the role plays, really helps people understand the impact of these negative experiences. So there's testimony as to the way people have been hurt or harmed. And one of the principles in restorative justice is to ask the question, how has this impacted you? Or what is the harm that has been caused by this? And that question is at the center of some of these testimonies, and it really conveys that what you do matters. And so then we teach about how to do that respectfully and stick up for people, protect yourself, do it in a helpful way, and even invite people to the better versions of themselves. So that's sort of the projection and the purpose. And like the judge said, you know, it rolled out in different cohorts at different times. The judge actually went down to the school and got to take a group through it. And they were really engaged, weren't they?
Yes, it was a really good experience. I don't know if I'm still on mute. Am I off mute? I'm good. Okay. You know, and also one of the other cohorts that we've really used this a lot with is at the Juvenile Justice Commission, or campus, I'm sorry, at our juvenile hall. And there's an organization called Focus Forward that has implemented it with a lot of groups, and they have noticed quite dramatically that it brings everybody much closer together. You know, in the Fresno video, there are examples of bullying that is done to a gay young man, I think she's a Palestinian, although maybe Middle Eastern. She's a Middle Eastern woman that was constantly being bullied about her hijab. There was a young woman that was a heavy set young woman that was on crutches and fell off her crutches, and the responses. And I think especially now, we see a lot of people getting involved across the United States and across the world. And the great thing about that is that we hear folks saying, we can't be bystanders anymore. Even if you are not affected directly by racism, all of us are affected by racism because whatever color your skin is, racism infects everything in our lives. And it has become institutionalized. As judges, we ask ourselves, what can we do to try and reverse our tendency to be part of the problem? And so I think what this video does and what this program does is it builds upon the idea that is so, in the fore of everybody's mind, that we can no longer be bystanders.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's the so the video has been made. I didn't have the technology to pull it up. I'm just not that savvy. But the video has been made, and there is the corresponding 5-step curriculum that I'm happy to share out. With that said, Kimberly, I'd love to invite your feedback, some initial thoughts as you hear this, what you'd like to reflect on or connect to.
Well, I'm excited. I want to thank you both for sharing this resource, and to share it for free is just amazing. As you were talking, believe it or not, I have a friend, and she doesn't remember if she met Judge Gottlieb or you, but she was subbing in our district, in a district that I work for, and she had an incident where there was some theft. And I was like messaging her, I'm like, this sounds like the program. So I wanted to have her share a little bit about what happened. I mean, I don't think anything happens by chance that we're meeting you now, but it was just a very powerful moment. So I wanted to ask if Karis would share.
Hello. Can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm.
So I was a sub, as she said, and I was helping a student one day and left my cell phone on the desk. And unfortunately, one of the students picked it up and put it in his or her backpack. And so, long story short, I had to figure out what happened to this cell phone, and of course administration was involved, and so we were able to recover it. Well, about a month or two later, it was a little bit of time later, I don't remember the exact timeline, I received a phone call from someone that was running that program and asked if I would be interested in sort of like a restorative justice, restorative practice, a circle, if you will. And I said, sure. And so I went, and this individual was in front of me. And I think, if I recall properly, he first apologized for what he had done and told me a little bit about himself, not to change how I felt about him, but just so that I think about reconciliation, just so that I could see what life was like from his perspective, from his lens. And so it also allowed me the opportunity to share what my experience was like and how I felt having gone through such a theft. And it was a very powerful moment because I was unable to understand a lot more about this individual, and I felt like we had a connection. And then I was given the option of accepting that, and I guess with that, he was able to have a reduced sentence so as not to ruin, what I would say, ruin his life going forward. Or I will say this, make his life even more challenging going forward. And I felt such honor in being part of something like that, because I always feel like my personal is my political. And so to have the opportunity to affect change, even though at the time I was very upset when it initially happened, I was able to move beyond. So I can speak to the power that experience holds. And that was on a smaller scale. I can't imagine some of the other things that can happen sometimes for individuals. So yeah, that's my story.
Thank you so much. And this this was around, I would say 2008 or 9, Karis, when you told me about this. So I don't remember when you were in the schools, and I usually don't say schools, but you can say schools, but you mentioned one that I used to work at. So I say that to say, like, and then it just came full circle that this work is needed. And I love what you're offering, because Karis had shared that story, look how many years ago, over 10 years ago. And so I just think that is so powerful that we are now coming forward talking about how this work is still important and how it helps move reconciliation forward. That is what the resources that I like to share, is to share with educators on how we can create a better tomorrow. And when we talk about the pandemic right now, post-pandemic, while I was working, I remember being in a classroom and a student was joking, and he was by a student that had a sniffle, and he said, "You got that, you know what, virus." And so they're calling names, and they're calling it, a racial virus. And kids, the kid looked down and was sad. And we don't have any protocols yet. We didn't have any then. It was post-pandemic. It had just started. And I had took the student outside and had a conversation. But we are going to face so much, I feel, of kids calling names, and even adults who may not know how to respond and support incidents where people are going to be offended. So thank you for what you have to offer. And I just hope that many people tap in and gain this knowledge to support our students.
Thank you, Kimberly. And thank you, Karis, for sharing about that experience. To share about the perspective of someone who was harmed, stolen from, apologized to, had a chance to share their experience, and then have a positive outcome from a negative experience is really special. And if it happened in 2009, that means you were probably one of the first cases that was allowed to do this. And if that's the case, then the reason you were able to experience that positive experience is because Judge Gottlieb, and restorative justice was not a known word or popular idea, but Judge Gottlieb said, no, this is going to happen in our court, and actually invited the collaboration of the other justice partners. And it took a year. It took a year for us to land on that. So how special is that 11 years later, you get to hear about this experience, Judge Gottlieb, that you helped facilitate.
It's great that, and I'm not going to say everywhere I go, but a lot of places that I go, when I'm talking to groups, it will come up, the topic of restorative justice. And every once in a while, there will be somebody, out of those more than thousands of cases that we've handled, that will say, oh my gosh, I went through that. And it was one of the best experiences that I've ever, been involved in. I do want to kind of take one myth and kind of bust the myth, and that is this. And I think that that's kind of a problem for a lot of people that are involved in either law enforcement or prosecution of crimes. There's a big fear of looking like you are soft on crime. And I promised that I wouldn't, get involved in any type of politics, but it is just so wrong-headed to think that in order to make yourself look powerful, that you have to make other people not powerful, and that you have to, in order to be tough on crime, it means that you have to, punish and throw people in jail or in prison for, all this time. Because in the end, everybody gets out. And the question is what do we want them to be like when they do get out? And so the whole thing behind restorative justice, and I have the great pleasure of saying, even our Sheriff Margaret Mims said, restorative justice is not soft on crime, it's smart on crime. And it's exactly right, because what it does is it reduces recidivism, it cuts costs, it enhances the experience not only for the kid that committed the crime, but also for the victim. As was just seen, you had an opportunity to participate in what's going to happen. And that's valuable in and of itself. So the whole idea behind SHARE is to take restorative justice and put it before the crimes happen. So, for the kids to recognize that when you do these things that are racist or bullying or hate crimes or, involving poor judgment, think about how it impacts everybody else. And that's what restorative justice is, except it's about the impact after the event. So this is kind of doing that role playing and putting yourself in the position of saying, okay, what happens next after I call that person that word? How does that person feel? How would I feel? So thanks so much for sharing that, because I think it's such a natural transition into the SHARE program. And I'll share one other just brief kind of story, and that is that we had a case at juvenile court that kind of had a lot of political undertones. And, we tried to do a restorative justice conference with it, bring the two parties together. More because of the parents than the kids, it didn't work. And so then we brought in SHARE, and that really kind of sealed the deal, because the kids had to role play with each other. And these are two kids that one committed an offense against another. And once they did that, it put a whole new light on the situation. So my final comments are this, and then I think we'll open it up for some questions, or Tim maybe has some comments. And that is this: believe it or not, there are a lot of resources in the courts, through probation, through the schools. I'm really involved in youth court. I think youth court is a great opportunity for teachers and principals and administrators to get involved in. We do some other, courts that are collaborative courts that try and look at things a little bit differently. I think most of us recognize as judges that there is institutionalized racism, and we have to do our part to try and rid the justice system of it. And it's a slow and arduous process, but programs like this are methods to kind of change that behavior.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I want to make sure that the people who join this call have a chance, if they want to share either their reflections on what they just learned, or maybe if a different pose a different question, what in joining this Zoom call for this hour, thank you for doing that. Were we able to attend to the reason you joined? Like, you joined for a reason. Did we answer all the questions that you had, or the interests you had, or the reason behind joining? Because we have a few minutes left here, and And if we didn't, that's okay. Now's the time to tell me that, because maybe I can answer a question or offer some information. So, you know, to those of you who joined, what were you hoping for through this call? And then is there anything else we can answer or connect you to?
So one of my friends wants to know, how do they get the information? How do they get the program?
I'm gonna put my email in the chat here, and you just email me and we'll get it to you.
And I can also send the video out too. I think I'm muted.
So it's in the chat there.
Anybody else? Okay. So at this time, will say that I will be sharing this with friends that I know that this will impact. I get asked for resources, so this will be one. I have a Facebook page. It's called Let's Talk About Culture, and it's a private group. So it's a group of like-minded people that are looking for resources, work in education, or one of my friends actually works in the prison, a couple, and they're looking for resources, whether it be for counselors or probation officers. So I'm excited to share. Oh, somebody just said, Rain said, just very thankful for your time. I'm reading some of the messages to you because we're on Facebook. Courtney says, amen. What a great resource again, Kimberly, Judge Godly, and Tim, learning in the help and helping us learn about restorative justice. You are trailblazers. Thank you. Oh, thanks. So I will tell you that your video will be shared with peers that will be on. I know that there's a board meeting tonight, so a few people are very busy. I do want to give you a shout out. Judge Godly, one of my other friends, said you work with her with the social service department. Lisa Nichols had shared, she says hello. You helped her out with a lot of her families. So she thanks you, but she's on a board meeting call right now. So you have some fans out there.
Well, good. Thank you so much for giving us the time to spread the word. You know, I'm a big fan of paying it forward, and you know, I think we all have an obligation to our community and to the world to share knowledge that will help other people. So I'm glad to be able to do it.
That's great. I also have someone on, she's not talking right now, but she's a consultant, and she's taken some of the work that we've learned about culture. So I thank you guys. That's Rashonda. She's been on like every meeting, Tim, but she's so busy. But you know, she's really taking the work and applying it to the consulting work that she does, you know, when we think about biases and inclusion and how do we be more inclusive. So I want to thank Rashonda for joining us, and we have a restorative practice counselor on as well, Erika Perez. I thank her for joining, and Miss Ortiz, thank you for joining, everybody. And so questions will come, and they can email you, Tim, or they'll put it in the chat, and people will view the video throughout the days to come. So I look forward to responses and engagement.
All right.
Could I just screen share my email address real quick then? If other people are gonna watch the video, maybe they don't have the chat option available to them. So do that just in case people want to.
Oh, we just got somebody that said, please share the link. Thank you, Jessica. I will in their equity page. I sure will share it. Thank you, Jessica. More resources, and don't suspend.
Perfect. And there's my email address in the screen share too.
All right, if we don't have any further questions, any closing remarks as we close the SHARE program again, email Tim Nightingale for more information. And thank you guys for your time. And thank you, Judge Gottlieb.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for connecting us to such amazing resources and your time and support. And just thank you for continuing to pay it forward. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Kimberly, for hosting this of your own volition. This has been so successful, and what you have put forward is helping so many people. So thank you for that, Kimberly.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. Enjoy your evening, everyone.
Everyone as well. Have a great evening.
Have a great
Thank
evening.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.